Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Tonight I'm going to be doing a review on Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. I read this at the behest of Alan from the Library of Alexandria, and let me tell you, thank you so much for pushing all of us on your Discord to read this book. I loved it. I think it's fantastic, and I think that everyone who likes fantasy should read it because it's just a ride, and the writing is wonderful. The characterization is superb, and it's an adventure. So before I get too far into it, I'm going to start with a spoiler-free kind of overview and a little bit of a review of some of the stuff I really loved, then move into spoilers because I need to talk about some stuff. And then I want to do some of the predictions that I made while I was reading and talk about those and see what I was right about and what I was wrong about. And then some of the predictions that I have for the rest of the series, because I'm definitely going to be reading the next couple ones. And the fourth one comes out in November, so yay! But to start off, Senlin Ascends, if you haven't heard of it, if you haven't read it yet, it is basically a take on the biblical mythos of the Tower of Babel. And so in the biblical story, the tower is filled with different civilizations and people who speak all sorts of different languages, and there's this like language barrier, and it's kind of chaos. In this story, the Tower of Babel is kind of like a vacation destination for some people. It's obviously a gigantic tower that was built a long time ago. No one knows who built it. No one knows why it was built. It's just here. And Senlin, our main character, is a headmaster in his town. It's kind of like a fishing village or something. It's further away. It's like pretty far away from the tower, and it's not very like modern. And so he just got married, and he is taking his wife, Maria, on their honeymoon to the Tower of Babel. Senlin has thought of it as this big, beautiful, wonderful thing for his whole life. Like, he's obsessed with the tower. He teaches students about the tower. Like, this is his dream, guys, to go to the Tower of Babel. And so once he goes there with his Everyman's Guide with him, which is kind of like a travel book that explains everything about the tower that he's read 10 billion times, he and his wife get off the train and they're walking up to the tower. It's kind of a far walk. They have to walk through this crazy, bizarre marketplace. And he and Maria get separated. And he thinks, oh, I'll just find her. I'll wander around here and I'll find her, no problem. Well, little did Senlin know that when people get separated at the Tower of Babel, they usually don't find each other again. And so the main thread of the story is Senlin trying to find his wife. And so he enters into the tower to try to find her, and he has to ascend through the different ringdoms as he's searching for her. And the Tower of Babel is not necessarily a really good place. Senlin is probably my favorite character in the whole story, and he starts out very naive. Like I said, he carries this like travel book for the tower with him everywhere. It's kind of like his Bible, and as he's trying to traverse the tower, he keeps referencing this book, and he realizes eventually that the tower is nothing like he thought it was. And so he has this revelation a little bit later than I would have liked him to. And so he has this wonderful character arc in this story, and I think that that's one of the pluses for reading this book. I think if you like really well fleshed out characters, if you like seeing realistic, like kind of slow burn character evolution, I think this is a book for you, because one of my most favorite things about the whole story was watching Senlin grow, and as he realizes that he's not the person that he needs to be in the tower, he also realizes that the person he thought he was kind of really isn't who he is under the surface. There's this beautiful quote that's from later on in the story. A character writes a letter to Senlin. Let me see if I can find it. It's not a spoiler at all, so don't worry about that. Oh my goodness, where are you? Here it is. The quote says, "It is easier to accept who you've become than to recollect who you were." And I think that's the main lesson that Senlin is learning in this story, because he has to grow a lot. Now, Senlin is kind of the most stable character in the whole book. Like, as he moves through the different ringdoms, you meet a whole bunch of different people, and they go in and out of the story. So I don't really want to talk too much about the other characters because I don't want to accidentally spoil something for you. I will say that all the others characters in the story, I think they're just as well fleshed out as Senlin is, even if they're not in the beginning. So almost everyone you meet isn't going to be completely inconsequential. And I feel like a theme in the tower is just kind of deceit, deception. Like nothing is as it seems. And that includes the people inside the tower. And there's just this kind of juicy unveiling of the different stories of the people that Senlin meets as he figures out what he's stepped into every time he goes into a different ringdom and what's going on with the people that he is asking to help him. The last thing I want to talk about characters before moving on to spoilers is the villains in this story. There isn't really like one super big baddie, at least yet. I think eventually there's going to be, because there's 4 books. But the nice thing I think is there's multiple villains in this part of the story, and they all have different reasons for being villainous, and none of them are the typical like mustache twirling, dastardly, I'm just gonna be evil to be evil people. You have someone who's kind of maybe been forced into his situation. There's a character who is kind of like, oh, I'm just a money grabber and I'm gonna be mean because I need to do it to secure my position in the world. And then you have someone who feels like they have to do what they're doing in order to survive. And so there's all these different layers and all these reasons for the madness that's happening inside the tower, and how it's all revealed and how it all comes together at the end is just, the payoff is so good. I finished this book, I hit the point of no return last night, and then I finished it this morning, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is going down right now. And all of the threads started coming together, and as soon as the threads came together, there were more questions. And I love that about this story, because there's so much going on and there's so much mystery surrounding the tower and what's happening to Senlin, but it doesn't leave you wanting more in a bad way, because I feel like things that you had emergent questions about were tied up, and then it just led you into the next story. Like, these are the things that we're going to continue talking about, and I'm super excited about that. Last thing I really want to touch on before I move on is the setting. I love the tower itself and the way that Bancroft has, constructed it and constructed the cultures and the, situations that he's putting Senlin in. I kind of want to explain it like it's hotels, sort of. So you have the basement level, the first level that he goes to. It's kind of like a grungy, dingy motel. So like the feeling is like when you have, spots on your sheets and you have like beer sticking on the floor and it's not really a cool place, and you're like, I kind of want to get out of here before I get diseases. And then you go up to the next level, and that's the parlor, and it's a little bit more posh. And then you go up to the third level, and that's the baths, and it's kind of like a spa. So as you move through it, on the surface, it looks like a good, vacation resort type place. But he is fooling you. So I think that Bancroft hit it out of the park with this story. I think from the characterizations to the setting to the intrigue that he's created for you all, I think it's really great. My one critique when it comes to the actual writing, because his prose is beautiful. The prose is like delicate and beautifully descriptive and reads kind of more like literary fiction than I think the standard like hardcore epic fantasies do. But the one thing I didn't like is that he uses a lot of similes, and for me, some of them were a little wild and out of the way, and about 50% of those I think really worked, and they helped with the description and imagery and helped me like really imagine exactly what Bancroft wanted to say. And some of them were really bad misses, and they just kind of kicked me right out of the story, and I hate it when books do that. So that's why I had to give it 4.5 stars instead of 5. Okay, so now on to the spoiler section. I don't even know where to begin with spoiler section, because there's just so much that happens in this book. And I love Senlin so much, but for most of the story, I wanted to take him and shake him because he's being so stupid half the time. Like, he is told in the beginning, do not trust anyone. No one is trustworthy in this tower. it's probably the only true thing anyone says to him in the entire story. And he completely ignores it. Senlin, dude, get your stuff together. Don't trust people. He's so naive in the beginning. He's this bumbling man, and he like holds onto his guide for dear life. And even when he's faced with these situations, like when he goes to the parlor and he is, put in this acting role, and he's confronted by these people, and this man has a gun and is shooting at him, and he's just like, what the heck is happening? And he and Edith run away. Like, he's still like, well, this isn't in the guide, and this isn't how the parlor is supposed to be. They said we're watching a show. I'm like, Senlin, get it together. Throw the book away. The rule book is obviously pointless. But, I think he learned his lesson eventually, but I think he needed to get like a couple kicks in the pants before he finally learned his lesson. But with Senlin, like, I don't think this book would be as good if Bancroft didn't do such a good job with Senlin's character. Like, I talked about it earlier in the spoiler-free section, but like the way that Senlin changes and the way he moves from being this bumbling kind of fool to this, by the end of the book, he's kind of cutthroat and willing to do kind of whatever it takes. I mean, he's killed people at this point, which is not something I believe Senlin thought that he would ever be capable of in the beginning of the story. It's this complete 180 in watching him evolve and watching how it all happens and how he kind of spirals down into a little bit of like depravity, especially like when he accidentally goes the drug den and stuff. Like, it was so cool to watch Bancroft do this because I think he does it masterfully. I have notes because there's so much crap I want to talk about, guys. The thing that I love the most, I know I keep saying I love everything. I do. I love this book. I say I love a lot of things. The way that Bancroft shows the lengths that people will go to survive, and the way that he shows how easily complicit people are in these horrible acts, like the philosophical quandaries that happen in this story and the actual brutality and just like awfulness that we see within the tower. It comes out of nowhere almost, because it's just like riding under the surface of everything. And then like in the parlor, and you're all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, these people are like taking people's eyeballs out. They're branding them with hot iron. They're not people who work in the tower. They're actors. There's people who have paid to come here and have a vacation. And they're so easily twisted because they're told, well, this is the experience, or you're paying for this, or, I don't know how they're lied to, because, I mean, we don't see them actually getting taken in to become those, like, nurses and stuff and the people who do that, but I can just imagine that these are just everyday people. And the tower really does corrupt. It's terrible. I would never want to go to the tower. Let me tell you, I would get lost somewhere way in the low ringdoms and never come out. It's just kind of this like maw of horror, and it's all wrapped in this really pretty bow of, oh, this is a vacation spot and you're going to go up and have a spa. I think that it was so the reveal at the end when Senlin's talking to the really tall Amazon woman whose name I cannot remember right now, I'm sorry. When he's in the carriage with her at the very end and he tells her his whole spiel about, oh, well, this is my theory about how everything comes together. So genius that the lower parts of the tower, they're corrupting people and keeping them down there and coming up with these horrible ways to trap people to work the tower so that they, the people who are up above, can live. But you only think that it's only so the people can live. You don't really know that. So there's this question of, well, what's really at the top of the tower? And no one answers that for you. Ugh. True story. It's just the revelation of his story and then his sacrifice for Senlin was really impactful. And I don't think it would have been as impactful if we hadn't kind of been faked out by his story a couple times, where you just kind of think he's this party boy, and then you find out that he could go home, but he doesn't, and you think it's only been a little while, and then you find out it's been 16 years and that he came from a situation just like Senlin. Like, it's heartbreaking, because that could be Senlin. If he wasn't trying so hard, he could easily slip into that. I mean, he already did a little bit. He was drinking wine and not really doing much and getting caught up in all this stuff and almost lost all his money. He sees that example of that man who gets turned into a hod, and he kind of gets his act together. And then after the party and the painting and everything, and you see him, Taru, standing there, his head shaved, holding that, basket full of coal, and you know what's happening to him. And then you find out that he made this sacrifice for Senlin, and they have that letter, and then you read that letter for him, and it's just like, ugh. But it's so good. And I know, I have a feeling, I really, really, really hope that we see Taru again. I have a hunch that I'll talk about at the end of the video, but it's so masterful. I think that Taru's character, you're told not to trust anyone, and then you get grumpy that Senlin is trusting everyone, and they all keep backstabbing him or betraying him or just being a no good, rotten nothing. And then you see Taru, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't trust him. He's this awful cad. He's going to do something, and you think that he's going to betray Senlin, like I really thought he was going to betray Senlin. And then Bancroft turns the tables on you, and you realize that he's sacrificing for Senlin, and because he wants Senlin to be able to do what he couldn't. Oh, really, really good storytelling. Edith, loved Edith. Wasn't so sure about her in the beginning. Love her when she comes back with a crazy, crazy arm thing that is the same as the Red Hand Man. That's crazy. I want to know what that's all about. I wish that I had not seen, the cover for the Arm of the Sphinx, because now I'm like, well, there's something up with that arm and the Red Hand Man, and now that the Red Hand Man is dead, like, and then the thing he says at the end, oh my gosh, the thing that he says at the end where he, calls her sister and says, like, what is the Sphinx gonna say? Like, something's gonna go down. And I have this feeling that Edith's kind of gotten herself into a bit of a pickle, and that neither one of them went into that willingly. I think they were coerced or felt like they didn't have an option other than to get this mechanical arm, and now they're being taken advantage of someone or some group of people inside the tower. And I don't know if Edith is supposed to be someone's assassin or if she's going to be conscripted to do something she doesn't want to, but I just feel like she's in it deep. She has a lot of agency. She's really spunky. I like her a lot. And when she comes back, she's just this kind of like badass lady, pirate woman, like first mate. I'm going to tell everyone what to do. And she's just like this ball buster, and she doesn't let Senlin get away with anything. But I think her character's going to be really interesting. I knew she wasn't going to die when she fell off that cliff. I knew it. But I'm interested to see where her story goes and what happens with them on their new ship that I don't know what they're going to do. They can't exactly go up to the next port. Like, they're going to be followed at some point. So I'm guessing they're going to be sky pirates for a while. So, God, I didn't even talk about the painter. The whole thing is just really messed up. And I want to know who the painter is, because he's not the artist of that painting. They just threw it that the painting's 100 years old. It's the key to the tower. Like, what is up with this painting, guys? I want to know. Is it going to have a secret map on the back? Is it like National Treasure? Are we going to need to go steal the Declaration of Independence?
I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence.
What is it? Because it's just a painting, so it can't... And they're not really technologically developed enough to have like computers or to have like chips hidden on the back of it or anything like that. I mean, they just have... Cars are a new thing. Electricity isn't everywhere. So I feel like it's got to be something hidden on the back or like maybe stuck under the paint. But it's really valuable to someone. So I'm assuming it has something to do with the creation of the tower or like the mythos of the tower itself. I'm so excited to find that out. But back to Maria's story. I feel so bad for her. When I first heard about, when you first hear about her like sitting for those nude portraits, you're like, oh no, what has she had to do? Is she selling herself? Whatever. No, she was actually being really smart. But then she was really stupid and got herself taken advantage of. And now she got sold off to the highest bidder, and we have no idea what's happening to her. And I really hope that she's not like forced to be this guy's wife. Like, heaven forbid she's pregnant in the next book. That would just break my heart. Like, that would break Senlin's heart. I would feel so bad if she had to do that to survive. up there in Pella, I think it's called. But the count is this pompous jerkface, and he bought her from a wife monger. Like, what the heck is going on in this story? That's almost worse than like the boudoir thing that's going on in New Babel. Fingal, the character Fingal, coming back after you meet him on the beer me rounds or whatever they're called, and you think he's just this like crazy weird dude who has some advice that Senlin may or may not take. And then he comes back again and you're like, what the heck? And his little house in the middle of the warehouse with his family, like, I'm glad Senlin didn't shoot him. I feel like the fact that he even considered it shows how far he's come, how far his character came. But I'm glad he didn't do it. He has some integrity left. Okay, so now on to my predictions. I made 4 predictions over the course of reading this book. All of them were within the first like half of the book, so I didn't want to guess anything. Like, I didn't guess anything that I already like knew. So the first one that I sent was, I think each of the lower levels has been designed to have a culture that pushes the inhabitants to do specific tasks that are required to keep the highest levels of the tower working. Now, I postulated that the bicycling for the beer that happens in the basement was to like collect kinetic energy to be used to power something. I was kind of wrong with that, because instead you draw water up from the like basin that's underneath the tower. It's apparently larger, like taller than the tower itself, which is absolutely crazy. So they're basically getting all these people drunk and like hooked on this alcohol and bribing them with this free alcohol to do all this work for them. And then because of the way the basement's set up, and there's like this gatekeeper keeping people from going up to the next level because they need money. If you get stuck with no money, then you're just SOL in the basement. And so what are you going to do if you have a crap life? Well, you're probably just going to, drink free beer and pedal all around the place. And so that's how they get their water built up, so that they could bring it upward to the next level. In the parlor, I thought that the fires were there for a reason. I didn't really know what the fires were supposed to do, but now it all makes sense, because the fires heat up the water so that in the 3rd level, the baths, you get all that smoke that can be moved up to the 4th level in New Babel and then get turned into electricity using the steam engines. It's genius. Josiah Bancroft, you are a genius, and I love it. I definitely did not get the whole steam engine thing. That went right over my head. Like, it was really cool. I was excited when I figured out that at least a little bit of my prediction was correct. So the next one that I guessed was the baths function to create slaves / unskilled workers to serve the tower by keeping people complacent and happy, so they spend money and become hods. And so that was another prediction, and I want to say it was like half right with that, because I don't think it's necessarily as purposeful as the whole beer me situation in the basement was, but I do think that it's a byproduct of the society that they've created. And like, they talk about the light reflecting along the water and off the walls, and how it's kind of hypnotizing, and how people never want to leave the water, and people get stuck in the baths because it's all about luxury, and so you stay there, and then your money runs out, or you get creditors, and then you borrow money, and then that runs out, and then you get turned into a hod, like what happened with Teru. And so I do think that that's how they get a lot of their hods, because they don't seem to do that in the basement so much. They just let kind of people mill about. So yeah, it's not really the primary purpose, but it kind of happens. My third one was, my third prediction was when Senlin found that wife monger's book that he found. That thing is so disgusting, guys. My feminist in me was like, how dare you? Don't do that. Like, this is awful. And my prediction was that Maria will be taken by one of those awful people and sold as a wife. And I think it's pretty true. She ends up, after talking to Ogier and sitting for his paintings and stuff, she talks about this Mr. Fosser, and how he's going to help her find her husband. And everyone who's reading at this point is like, Maria, don't do it. Don't talk to him. Don't do it. Get away. Well, I mean, she does it because she feels like she doesn't have any option, and she didn't get warned by anyone, and she didn't see that book. So this Mr. Fosser, like, grooms her and convinces her to go along with his plan. And then she meets that count, and she thinks that he's going to help her, like, finance her finding her husband. And then he takes her away to be his wife. And so she basically is kind of sold off, because I'm sure Mr. Foster gets money for that. And it's really disgusting, and I hate it so much. And then he comes and trashes Osier's painting studio, and now she's up there trapped with this guy on the 5th level, I believe. So now someone has to go find her, and I'm sure he's gonna have this guy threw a glove in Osier's face. Please. How outdated is slapping someone with a glove and throwing it in their face? It's like, I challenge thee to a duel, smack. Come on. So when we get up to that level, it's going to be something. I mean, there's swords in this story. It's going to be ridiculous, and I kind of like it, but I feel bad for Maria. I hope she doesn't end up, like, pregnant or something in the next book. And then the last prediction that I made during the story is when Senlin says, "I won't let the tower turn me into a tyrant," my brain was like, that sounds like foreshadowing to me. That sounds like foreshadowing. And I don't really have a particular reason why I think that. I think because he's changed so much in this first story, and he was so adamant to stay who he was, and then he just let it go because he realized he couldn't be that person anymore if he was going to find his wife, and he got more ruthless and he got more cutthroat, and he started lying to people. Like, there's a point at the end of the story, and I can't remember the exact quote, but where he says he's the most trustworthy person in the tower, and I'm sitting here like, dude, I don't really think so, because haven't you been lying to a lot of people? So he's doing some really bad stuff, but he still sees himself as better than everyone else. And I think that is a slippery slope that can lead to him becoming a tyrant. Like, I mean, the 3rd book's called Hot King. I said, he might become the Hot King. I don't know. Is that him? Is that someone else? Who knows? So I just feel like by him saying that he's not going to do it, and him kind of lying to himself about how honest he is and how good he is compared to everyone else, it's just a recipe for disaster. And so I'm interested to see how that pans out. I love Senlin. I don't want him to turn into a bad guy, but I feel like he might just get himself into situation after situation that gets worse and worse, and he spirals down. And hopefully by the end of the series, he'll, like, redeem himself or something, but I don't know, guys. So that's the only prediction that I had that I don't really know, because we didn't, find the answer to that yet. So the book titles: Senlin Ascends, and then we have The Arm of the Sphinx, and on the cover it has the big metal arm, and it's like the Red Hand Man, and it's also like Edith, and now the Red Hand Man is kaput. But is the Arm of the Sphinx going to kind of tell a little bit more about Edith's story? Are we going to figure out what's happening with her arm? Is she going to kind of be the main character? Not the main character, because Senlin's going to be the main character, but, like, is she going to have a bigger part in that story? And then the third one is the Hot King. Now my question is, Teru's very charismatic. Teru's very outgoing. He has a way with people. He's very pushy sometimes. Does he rise from his position of being a lowly Hod and organize the Hods into some sort of revolt? And is Senlin going to meet back up with him and work with the Hods to take over the tower and, like, knock down the people up at the top who are in the royal levels that are, taking advantage of all the people down there? Or is Senlin going to get in trouble and get turned into a Hod, and is he going to rise through the ranks and become a leader? That would be an interesting character growth for him. That would be a lot different than who he was when he came into the tower. Or is the Hod King someone else? It could be. I don't know. I kind of like the idea that it's either Teru or Senlin. I would feel bad for Senlin if he got turned into a Hod, but who knows? So, this has been a great book, and I know this has been a long review, but I had a lot of feelings about this book. I don't think a lot of other books are going to get quite a lengthy review, but guys, look at I just love so much about this story. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I hope that you are intrigued about these questions that I have, and I'm excited to talk about the Arm of the Sphinx with you guys next. If you liked this video, please subscribe, and I will see you next time.